Hello viewers, this is Trevogan. Today I want to talk about antisocial behavior orders, or ASBOs. This was brought to my attention by Sargon of Akkad's This Week in Stupid videos. He mentioned it in passing as a reference to one of the articles he covered. And I had no idea what a ASBO even was, because I live in the United States and it's only in the United Kingdom. So I looked it up, and it's kind of bizarre, to be honest. It's ridiculous in a way. From Wikipedia, an antisocial behavior order, or ASBO, is a civil order made in the United Kingdom against a person who has been shown, on the balance of evidence, to have engaged in antisocial behavior. Which, right off, I'd like to interject, is a very ambiguous term. The orders introduced by Prime Minister Tony Blair in 1998 were designed to correct minor incidents that would not ordinarily warrant criminal prosecution. And, of course, as such, they probably shouldn't prosecute them. But they are, because they're stupid. The orders restrict behavior in some way, by prohibiting a return to a certain area or shop, or by restricting public behavior, such as swearing or drinking alcohol. You may see the ASBO is connected with young delinquents. In July 2010, new Home Secretary Theresa May announced her intention to reform antisocial behaviors for England and Wales, with the abolition of ASBOs in due course, in favor of alternative community-based social control policies. Which, to me, sounds like it might be better, but the term social control doesn't sound good regardless. It just sounds misguided. I mean, why would you want to control society except for, I hate to use the term nefarious, but it seems, to be honest, nefarious purposes. Uses. An ASBO may be issued in response to conduct which has caused or is likely to cause harm, harassment, alarm, or distress. Alarm. Does that mean you could get in trouble for causing, I don't know, people to worry about sexism, perhaps? Although they wouldn't do that, would they? Because they're pushing the pro-feminist objective, but it's just funny to push it, turn it around on them and say how it could be used against what they think is the status quo. What they have as the status quo. It's not what they think it actually is that. To one or more persons not of the same household as him or herself, and where an ASBO is seen as necessary to protect relevant persons from further antisocial antisocial acts with the defendant. Sorry there, I just got on the wrong screen by accident, so I was looking at the wrong one. In England and Wales, they are issued by magistrates' courts, and in Scotland by the sheriff courts. Now, that right there is really bizarre. Because it sounds as if, okay, relevant persons. I thought they were saying that it would actually protect them from themselves. The person being the ASBO would be protected from themselves, from harming themselves, like that. But that doesn't make any sense because there is no harm involved in any of these things. Well, most of them at least. The British government introduced ASBOs by the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998. Sorry. In the UK, a CRASBO is a criminally related ASBO. One local authority has published photos of those given ASBOs on an internet site. Oh, e-shaming, huh? I do wonder what that website is. Warwickshire Police Media Portal. Images of ASBO and Craspo. And it appears to go to a page that no longer exists. Because it doesn't go to that itself, it just goes to the main page for Warwickshire Police. Huh. Yeah, it's no longer existing. It's no longer in existence. Antisocial behavior includes a range of problems such as abandoning cars. Now this one just seems weird because what's really the harm? I mean, I know you don't want to crowd the streets, but other than having them taken to impound or to recycling, I don't really see the harm in this. I mean, it's an inconvenience at best. Arson. Now that one I can agree with. Begging. Here's where the real problems begin. Begging. You're in effect going to slap a citation of sorts on homeless people. Really, begging is a part of the way of life for homeless people. There is no way they can avoid it in most cases. If they have no job, they're going to have to beg. If they have no job and no home, they are going to be begging, and punishing them for that, I think, is not ethical. But it's commonly punished, from what I hear, especially in bigger cities. Casteism. Why would you punish somebody for thinking about belonging to a caste? I don't really understand that one. Dangerous driving. Okay, then why not give them a speeding ticket? Why give them an ASBO? And wouldn't that usually be punished anyway from other laws? Traffic laws? Defecating or urinating in public. That's kind of understandable, but I don't see why you'd have to do that. For the ASBO, I don't know why you'd use that for. Disturbing the peace. Dogging, which is exhibitionistic public sex. I can't seem to talk right today. Exhibitionistic public sex. I do know the word, I just stuttered with it a bit. I tend to stutter when I'm reading, especially out loud. Drug dealing or consumption of controlled recreational drugs. So, I guess it'd be marijuana, because I think that marijuana is legal in the United Kingdom. I think. Let's check about that. Not USA. What? Of course I have it. United Kingdom. Yeah, it's illegal. So there's that again. People think that it should be legal in a lot of places, and I've been kind of on the fence about that. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. I mean, prohibition has always been very ineffective, and it's in fact made things worse. If you go back to the prohibition of alcohol in the United States, it created an entire market for illegal alcohol, which made things a lot worse and helped out the mobsters a lot. But anyway, drunken behavior. So you have the right to get drunk, but you don't have the right to act drunk. I don't really get that one. I mean, people act irrationally, sure, and without constraints, inhibitions when they're drunken, but this just seems so off the cuff, bizarre. Fare evasion. So if they go around a toll booth for a bridge or what? Homophobia. Okay, here's where it starts getting ridiculous. Homophobia. isn't antisocial behavior. I mean, I'm not saying that homophobia is a good thing, but I wouldn't classify it as an antisocial behavior. I mean, I know it's used in terms of connotations of hate, not just fear, but it's kind of strange to call it antisocial behavior. But it gets better. Intimidation. So, bullying? Why? I, I, there are no words. You, bullying is bad, but this is so vaguely defined that you could slap it on anybody, even if somebody just vaguely disagrees with, say, a woman in our gynocentric society, and they'd be guilty, quote unquote, guilty of intimidation. Next, we have littering, or fly tipping, which I found out from a search is illegal dumping, also called fly dumping or fly tipping. Loitering with intent. So now, if you drop a piece of paper on the ground outside, you can be slapped with an ASBO in the United Kingdom. That's just ridiculous. Why would you call littering antisocial? It's not literally what socializing is. The dictionary definition of social just doesn't support that. I already know what it means, but just for the sake of things. Social. Of or relating to society or its organization. Alcoholism is related as recognized as a major social problem as the example, but that's not the same thing as littering. Well, it's just an example, but still. Zoology of a bird gregarious, breeding or nesting in colonies, as in social groups and whatnot, uniquely social animals. Or a noun. Sorry, the first one's an adjective. I've neglected to mention that. The noun form is a informal social gathering, especially when organized by members of a particular club or group, as in a church social. Why would you? Littering is a bad thing, yes, but it's not worth a crime. I don't crime charge. I don't think criminal charge for dropping a piece of paper on the ground. I don't think it's a good thing, but and if everybody did it, of course, it'd be a huge problem. But this seems overkill. I mean, it restricts. ASBOs restrict your rights if you are slapped with one. It mentions later on what ASBOs actually do, and I'll get to that. Noise pollution. So if you're yelling in public, pedophilic activity. Of course, that's not a good thing, but I failed to see how that's even relevant. These ones are just thrown in. Homophobia, pedophilic activity, racism. They don't even fit. I mean, they're bad things, but they're just randomly thrown in there. Rioting. As I said, racism and rioting, and then rudeness. Such vaguely defined terms. What constitutes rudeness? What does not constitute rudeness? In the end, it's kind of vague. I don't think that this is good lawmaking. Smoking in public places. And here's the best one, I think, on the list. Spitting. Spitting is an antisocial behavior. Spitting! Spitting is an antisocial behavior. Every time I read that, it cracks me up for some reason. Spitting is an antisocial behavior. Behavior. Spitting is antisocial behavior. Littering and spitting. Why would you do this? Stealing, mugging, or shoplifting. Isn't there already a law besides that for that? I don't think I had laws about it before then for that. Why do they need an additional one? I don't think you need ASBOs for that. Urban exploration. Now, some people might even know what that is. Urban exploration is exploring abandoned buildings. I've read about it before, but anyway, just a summary of it. And of course, These articles that I've looked at here in the video will be listed in the description. Anyway, it can be dangerous, but I really fail to see why there'd be any punishment for it. I think you assume any risk you take, unless you're trespassing, that would be understandable. But that's not always the case. Vandalism, criminal damage, or graffiti. This list is just beyond ridiculous. I mean, ASBOs themselves could have been part of his list of This Week in Stupid stuff. But it wouldn't have been this week because it was 1998. But ridiculous. It's stupid. History. ASBOs were introduced in England, Scotland, and Wales by the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998. Later legislation strengthened its application. In England and Wales, this has largely been via the Antisocial Behaviour Act of 2003. In Northern Ireland, through an Order in Council, and in Scotland, with the Antisocial and Sexual Behaviour Scotland Act of 2004. Scotland, however, has an existing tribunal charged with dealing with children and young persons who offend the children's hearing system. In a press release of October 2004, 20th of October 2004, Tony Blair and David Blunkett announced that further measures would be used to extend the use and definition of ASBOs. Their remit would include extension of the witness protection program in antisocial behavioral cases. So they have witness protection for antisocial behavior. Why? People need protection for telling that somebody littered? It doesn't make any sense. More courts dealing with cases, more offenses including dog fouling, litter, graffiti, and nighttime noise liable for fixed penalty notices. More ambiguous terms. Giving parish councils the power to issue fixed penalty notices for infringements. The press release continued by remarking, in the past year, around 100,000 cases of antisocial behavior have been dealt with. 2,633 ASBOs and 418 dispersal orders have been issued in the same period. October 25th of 2005, Transport for London announced its intent to apply a new law giving them authority to issue orders against repeat fare dodgers and increased fines. The first ever ASBO to given to offender Cat Richards for repeated drunken. Oh, the first ever ASBO ever given. Okay. Was given to offender Cat Richards for repeated drunken disorderly behavior. As of 31st of March 2004, 2,455 ASBOs have been issued in England and Wales. So not really that many, actually. They make it sound like it's be a very common thing, but apparently they're not used that very often. They're not used that often. On the 30th of March 2006, the Home Office announced that 7,356 antisocial behaviors have been orders have been given out since 1999. So in 3 years, that number had more than doubled from 2,455 to 7,356 in England and Wales. In three years, that number had doubled from that, which makes me wonder why. What warrants an ASBO? Standard of proof. Applications for ASBOs are heard by magistrates sitting in their civil capacity. Although the proceedings are civil, the court must apply a heightened civil standard of proof. This standard is virtually indistinguishable from the criminal standard. Then why don't they use the criminal standard? The applicant must satisfy the court so that it is sure that the defendant has acted in an antisocial manner. I'd like to point out again that antisocial itself is a vague term and can be used for whatever the establishment wants to label it as antisocial. It could be anything, even down. Not that it's included in ASBOs, but the word thought crime comes to mind. This is easily applicable to that. It's so vague you could slap it on anything. I know that it's not actually one of the things on the list, but it's this. I hate to use a slippery slope fallacy, but this just seems to be leading down that road. doesn't seem fallacious in this case. The test for the court to be satisfied that it is so that it is sure is the same direction that a judge gives a jury in a criminal case heard in the Crown Court, and is also known as satisfying the court beyond reasonable doubt. Pursuant to Section 1, is that paragraph 1? Civil Evidence Act of 1995, an applicant and a defendant has the right to rely on witness statements without calling the makers of those statements known as hearsay. So, why are they allowing hearsay? That opens up a huge can of worms. Hearsay itself is very, very fallible. You can call to mind tons of cases where hearsay has one way or another been used in that way, and I won't go over any of them, but there have been many, and allowing the use of hearsay as evidence is one of the, I think, patent signs of a kangaroo court, as they are called, which, for those who don't know, is when justice is pretty much just thrown out the window in behavior in favor of mockery of justice. A complete lack of justice. Just go for whatever the group wants that's prosecuting. No legal standards of any propriety. If a party proposes to rely upon a hearsay statement, then the other party is entitled to ask the court for permission to call that witness for cross-examination. Which is a good thing, but it's still, they shouldn't allow it in the first place. If the court refuses to grant such an application, then the defendant will quite obviously be able to cross-examine the makers of the hearsay statement, because they won't be there. Duh. Nevertheless, it is open to them, in accordance with the Civil Evidence Act, to submit that the court should place little or no weight upon material that has been tested by way of the cross-examination. Section 4, paragraph 1, Civil Evidence Act of 1995 states that in estimating the weight, if any, to be given to hearsay evidence in civil proceedings, the court shall have regard to any circumstances from which any inference can be reasonably drawn so as to reliably as to the reliability or otherwise of the evidence. The High Court has emphasized that the use of the words "if any" shows that some hearsay evidence may be given no weight at all, which is a good thing. It should be given no weight regardless. That shouldn't even be considered. It's hearsay. For an ASBO to be made, the applicant must prove beyond all reasonable doubt that the respondent has behaved in an antisocial manner. The applicant can rely on hearsay evidence. However, the Court of Appeal has stated that it does not expect the court to find that the criminal standard has been reached by relying solely on hearsay evidence. The Civil Evidence Act of 1995 itself makes clear that courts should consider what weight, if any, at all, attaches to hearsay material. In Cleary, the Court of Appeal again restated that the court should consider attaching no weight at all to such material, in accordance with the words of the statute. Then why are they including it at all? If they're saying that you should consider attaching no weight to it at all. It's not even really worthy to count as evidence, but they're counting it as evidence. It makes no sense. It is for the court to decide what weight to give the hearsay evidence. The Court of Appeal has stated that the high standard of proof is difficult to meet if the entirety of the case, or the majority of it, is based on hearsay evidence. The proper approach will be for a court to consider to what extent the hearsay evidence is, amongst other things, supported by other evidence, the cogency and similarity of supporting instances of hearsay evidence, and the cogency and reliability of contradictory evidence supplied by defendant. Where, for example, 10 anonymous witnesses who are unrelated to each other each provide a witness statement as to the defendant's antisocial behavior, which is a nebulous term, where each statement refers independently to the same particular events, and where this is supported by a witness statement from an anonymous witness, which is a housing officer who confirms that residents have made complaints about a particular person over a period of time, which to me sounds like a baseless thing. You could complain about it without there actually being any reason to complain. It could be a crime that's just made up to get back at somebody as revenge. I mean, sure, they'll try and prove it, but it seems to be very open to false accusations. Probably not to the same extent that rape cases are, but it's still open to false accusations. Or a period of time the court may be justified in according to statements a fair degree of weight. Which they shouldn't, because they're hearsay, but they think that's a good thing to do, which I heartily disagree with. Wholly and heartily. Typical ASBOs. Antisocial behavior is an order of the court which tells the individual over 10 years old how they must not behave. Apparently doesn't apply to 9-year-olds or 9-year and 11 months and 29 days old. Only 10 years old. Why? I don't know. I mean, every law has to be arbitrary, but you can't. There is no real reason, is there? I mean, you think about it. I mean, you can't punish kids naturally for things that are at that age very easily. I mean, they don't really have the mental capacity to fully understand what they're doing at that point, or to understand the gravity of it. Or at least some don't. Some do, some don't. Depends on the particular maturity of the individual child. But 10 years old is so arbitrary. An order can contain only negative prohibitions. It cannot contain a positive obligation, meaning they can't make you do something instead of preventing you from doing something for the ASBO. To obtain an ASBO, a two-stage test must be satisfied by the applicant authority. See Section 1, Paragraph 1 of the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998. The first is that the defendant has committed acts causing or likely to cause harassment, alarm, or distress within 6 months of the date of issue of the summons. The second is that an order is necessary to protect persons from further antisocial behavior. Once again, do you need protection from noise pollution or from littering? I fail to see why that would even be justly stated. You don't need protection from antisocial behavior. It doesn't actually hurt anyone in a literal sense. It hurts them in a figurative sense. Like insults would hurt somebody figuratively, not physically. Perhaps emotionally, but not physically. And you can't really, I think, do this in any reasonable sense. Such an act is not reasonable. It's not justified. That's just my opinion. The applicant has to satisfy the court that the individual has acted in an antisocial manner. That is to say, in a manner that was caused or is likely to cause harassment, alarm, or distress to one or more persons not of the same household as himself. Which seems kind of goofy. I mean, why can't you be given an ASBO for causing alarm or harassment or distress to members of your own house? I don't know what that's about. Apparently, it can't apply to your brother or sister or mother, for example, if they live in the same house as you. A court may order an ASBO only if such an order is necessary, which is, again, extremely vague. Further, each prohibited act will usually be an act preparatory to criminal offense rather than the offense itself, but not always. Rabbis versus Commissioner of the Police of the Metropolis, 2007, EWHC, 2008, for example. That was a court case involved in that. But we're going to go into that. And in addition, each prohibition itself must be necessary. It may be inappropriate for a condition to be not to spray graffiti. The final act is opposed as opposed to prohibiting the carrying of a paint spray can in a particular area marked on the map. So only necessary to the court will assure that the respondent continually created graffiti with spray cans in a specific area. An order must be tailor-made to the individual defendant. So it's personalized? Why? It's not a greeting card. You don't need to personalize it. It's a legal law. I don't. Well, that's repetitive. It's a legal statute. It's a punishment. You don't need to tailor it to the defendant. The ASBO represents a form of personalized criminal law. It must be relevant to their particular antisocial behavior, or must not be drafted too widely or imprecisely. Which, of course, is vague again. It could be easily stated to be too vague when it isn't, or it could be stated to be not vague when it is. An ASBO is very similar to a civil injunction, even though the differences are important. First, the injunction is supposed to protect the world at large in a given geographical area, rather than an individual. The world. So, not just the United Kingdom? I fail to understand how they even affect the rest of the world. Second, breach of an ASBO is a criminal offense to be tried in a criminal court, applying the criminal standard beyond all reasonable doubt. A power committal to prison is available for breach of civil injunction, but the court is unlikely to exercise that power. A criminal subject to antisocial behavior order, where it does not follow criminal conviction, has an automatic right of appeal against making both the order against both making the order and its terms to a higher court. There is also the availability of an appeal to the higher court by way of case stated. There is no appeal against the variation of orders, and variation has been used to add extra conditions that extend the duration of ASBOs. An application for an ASBO is considered by the courts in its civil jurisdiction and is a civil order. However, breach of an ASBO is a criminal offense. Note, breaching it is a criminal offense, as well as the ASBO itself is enacted to punish a criminal offense. And conviction may result in up to 5 years imprisonment for breaching your ASBO for loitering, for example. So if you loiter, get an ASBO, and then loiter again, you can go to prison for 5 years, or 2 for if you're a minor. But that's just ridiculous. 5 years for loitering or littering or spitting. Why? It doesn't make any sense. Legislation needs to be brought into force to compel magistrates to make a parenting order where a person under the age of 16 breaches their ASBO. Other examples include abusive behavior, begging, as was mentioned before, fly posting, which is guerrilla marketing tactic of putting up flyers in legal or illegal places when you're not supposed to, apparently. Used by legal activist groups and companies. Harassment, organizing illegal raves. Okay. Suicide attempts. So you're going to punish them for attempting to suicide? That's like the death penalty for suicide, although nowhere near as strict. There's no reason to punish somebody when they need mental help. Mental assistance, I mean, because they have issues with their mental health. It doesn't make any sense. The very act of trying to punish this is simply going to make them more likely to commit the act in the first place. That is, if you punish them for trying to commit suicide, I would venture that they'd be more likely to try and do it again. So it seems pointless. Theft or vandalism. As common ASBOs are, for example, as common and more conventionally used ASBOs as listed by a report to the Home Office to illustrate the difficulties of ASBOs include 2 teenage boys from East Manchester forbidden to wear one golf glove as it was a symbol of membership to a particular gang. That doesn't make any sense. Gangs obviously are a bad thing, but simply wearing the attire doesn't make any sense. I mean, you could actually just have lost a glove and not be part of the gang, and you could get an ASBO for wearing one glove. It doesn't make any sense. If you lost your glove in the middle of winter, there's no reason to punish that. A 13-year-old forbidden. I'm not saying that wasn't the case in this for that, but I'm just saying it could be used that way. A 13-year-old forbidden to use the word grass is a term of abuse in order to threaten people. That's a term of abuse, apparently. Maybe in the United Kingdom it is, but it certainly isn't in the United States. I hadn't heard of that. A 15-year-old forbidden to play football in his street. I'm noticing a trend here. So far, they've all been males. It seems to be usually used to punish men. I wonder if that has to do with the gynocentric society I got to talk about. Because it is something that is very common and prevalent in the United Kingdom. An 18-year-old male was banned from congregating with more than 3 youths. Why more than 3? It's subsequently arrested when he entered a very popular youth club. Why? The subject scheduled for that day in the club was how to deal with antisocial behavior. So if you're trying to deal with antisocial behavior in the club, if they were trying to deal with antisocial behavior in the club, why were they punishing him for going to that club if this is actually trying to prevent the very thing that the law was put in place in the first place for, antisocial behavior? They're counteracting their own efforts, basically. The government is counteracting their efforts of this youth club, which is trying to follow the law that the government set in place. In effect, it is counteracting its own efforts. The government is counteracting its own efforts. The first farmer to be given an ASBO was instructed to keep his geese and pigs from damaging his neighbor's property. Criticism. From their inception, ASBOs have been controversial, which is hardly surprising. They've been criticized as being without strong and principled justification, a distraction from the failure of the government's law and order policies, a recipe for institutionalized vigilantism, and an emblem of punitive populism. Andrew Rutherford has commented that the ASBO provides a particularly striking example of the criminalization of social policy. A Maury opinion poll published on the 9th of June 2005 found that 82% of the village public were in favor of ASBOs. However, only 39% believe they are effective in their current form. Then why are they in favor of them if they're not effective? If they don't think they're effective. But go figure that one. Go figure. A 2012 survey by Angus Reid, Public Opinion, showed that only 8% of Britons believe ASBOs have been successful in curbing antisocial behavior in the UK. In other words, not really successful at all. So, why are they using them? It seems silly. Other parties are always concerned about the open-ended nature of ASBO penalties. That is, there is little restriction on what a court may impose as the terms of an ASBO, which I find to be a problem as well. That doesn't seem to be a good idea at all. It's very open interpretation. They can basically punish people however they want. And little restriction on what can be designated as antisocial behavior. As I said, very vague. Critics have reported that only around 3% of 3% of ASBO applications have been turned down. So there isn't much scrutiny applied to them either. In July 2007, the local government ombudsman published a report criticizing Manchester City Council for serving an ASBO based purely on uncorroborated reports of nuisance by a neighbour, and the council agreed to pay £2,000 in compensation. A 2005 memorandum submitted by the National Association of Probation Officers, NAPO, asserted that there is ample evidence of the issuing ASBOs by the courts being inconsistent and almost a geographical lottery. Why would this even be employed as a law if it's so arbitrary and vague? But it gets better and continues anyway. There is great concern that people are being jailed following the breach of an ASBO, where the original offense was itself non-imprisonable, like loitering, or littering, or spitting. There's evidence or homophobia. You probably can get put in jail for homophobia. I'm just guessing. Not that I'm saying people should be homophobic. I'm just saying it doesn't seem like you should punish people for it. That seems too totalitarian. There's also evidence that ASBOs have been used where people with mental health problems, where treatment would have been more appropriate. Indeed, that would be a problem. In Nevo's view, the time is right for a fundamental review of the use and appropriateness of antisocial behavior orders by the Home Office. In 2002, Home Office data stated that in the cases where information was available, there was a high proportion where some mitigating factor appeared to have contributed to their behavior. In other words, there was something there that would have been a justification for it, or a reason for it. Like if you littered, I can't think of a good reason why you littered, but the point remains that that would obviously be an issue if you can prove that there was a reason for it and you're still punished for it anyway. Not for littering specifically, but I'm just saying. It's very vague and easily misused as a law. I'm just taking a drink of water here because this is thirsty reading. In 2002, the time is right for a fundamental review of the use and appropriateness of antisocial behavior orders by the Home Office. In 2002, Home Office data stated that in cases where information was available, there was a high proportion or some mitigating factor appeared to have contributed to their behavior. I already read that. Yeah, I did. Sorry. Almost a fifth were drug abusers and a sixth were alcohol abusers. Overall 44% were engaging in substance abuse or had a learning disability, so they're being punished for having a learning disability. Unintentionally, but still. And a further 16% included persons with psychological and behavioral problems in the family. Similar results are found in Scotland. A case file review showed that 55% of those given ASBOs had substance abuse, mental health, or learning disability problems. The use of ASBOs in Scotland, it's just a source. A survey of youth offending teams by the British Institute for Brain Injured Children in 2005 showed that 38% of ASBOs went to people with significant mental disorders. Therefore, I would claim that it's not a good law if it's unintentionally targeting people who have mental disorders. Problems included clinical depression, suicidal tendencies, as was mentioned before about the suicidal tendencies being punished, autism, psychosis, personality disorders, learning disabilities, and ADHD, questioning whether young people suffering from these illnesses should be held to a lower standard of behavior than others. By contrast, the same survey of ASBO teams gave only a 5% reported incidence of mental impairment. Of those who gave out the ASBOs? I don't really understand that statement there. What are they saying? This massive difference suggests that most ASBO teams do not take into account mental health problems. Oh, that's how they evaluate it. That's how the ASBO teams evaluate it. I see. Okay. As it be only 5% of the total. Most ASBO teams do not take into account mental health problems, even though the Home Office safeguards for vulnerable people in the ASBO process require it. Therefore, again, it's not a very effective law. ASBO effectiveness has also been questioned. The House of Commons reply is stated that 53.7% of ASBOs were breached in England in 2005, 69% in 2006, 70.3% in 2007. In large cities, the rate can be higher. The breach rate in Manchester reached 90.2% in 2007. This level of breaching raises an interesting issue. The first test to justify an issuing of an ASBO that the ASB has been proved to be criminal standard. The second test is that the order is necessary to prevent future acts of ASB and provide protection to the victim. However, the criminal standard is not applied to the second test, which it should be, probably. Indeed, Lord Stein, House of Lords, on the application of McCann versus Manchester Crown Court case of 2003, yada yada, said the inquiry under Section 1, Paragraph 1b, namely such an order is necessary to protect persons from further antisocial orders by him. They try and have it be gender neutral these days in laws, usually. So I wonder. Probably it isn't, but it doesn't implicate some possible bias against men again. Although I'm not usually one to claim that, given that originally, linguistically, it was not designed as a way to single out men. It was designed as a way to refer to everybody by one word. Him, even though it's just understood to mean that it might be he or she, it's just easier to say one word rather than three. As in he instead of he or she. But anyway, moving on. According to government evaluations, 80% of ASBO, in the ASBO, ASB intensive family support projects introduced to ASBOs, 80% of families targeted had serious mental or physical health and learning disability problems. 1 in 5 children had were affected with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. 60% of families were recognized as victims of ASB of the families. Okay. Project managers describe many families as easily scapegoated in neighbors' disputes. There again, it's basically what I was saying earlier. How about you could basically just come up with a false claim, a false accusation as revenge on your neighbors, which is what people appear to have been doing in some cases. HRS 230 calls for a review of ASBO policy and investigation procedures to make the whole process fairer. A later study of 53 projects by the National Center for Social Research noted that 42% of children with mental health problems reported to have ADHD or hyperactivity, and 29% depression or stress. Amongst adults, 69% had depression. They really need to clear up the bias in this law. It's incredibly unintentionally biased against people with mental disorders. I find that very objectionable. A later comprehensive review of family intervention projects over a decade found little objective evidence for significant and sustained reduction in ASB in the families, and concluded that underlying mental health and disability problems remained largely unaddressed. Indicated that there has been criticism that ASBO is sometimes viewed as a badge of honor by the youth, meaning they purposely get an ASBO in order to get street cred, apparently, which is yet another reason why this law is not a good thing. Although some laws, of course, could be seen as a rite of passage for street cred and whatnot, and be necessary. But I personally don't think that ASBOs sound like they are good law in the first place. They're too vague. NACRO, the biggest criminal justice related charity in England and Wales, has published 2 reports. First, claiming that ASBOs were a failure due to being costly and slow to obtain, and the second criticizing their use by the courts, saying they are being used too hastily before alternatives have been tried. It then goes over proposals for replacement, but I'm not going to go over that, and popular culture examples of it. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I really hope that such ridiculous laws don't become the standard across the world. Although there are probably also laws like this in the United States that I'm not aware of, but they probably do exist. It's just more stringent in the United Kingdom, and if they do have ones like this in the United States, they don't really enforce them as much as they sound like they do in the United Kingdom. Anyway, thank you and have a good day.